Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Hill Country. I'm Janet Belden, and I'm the Service Associate this morning. We are pleased that all of you are here to celebrate and worship with us. Visitors are a gift to us, and we especially welcome you here, whether during this Zoom service or later on our YouTube channel. Our guest speaker today is Elena Westbrook, a member of Community UU Church in Plano, Texas, where she leads the worship associates and is a regular guest speaker. Her spiritual background was formed by liberal Christianity, Buddhism, neo-paganism, and eclectic reading habits. If anyone has an announcement, please wave and Justin will unmute you, or you can post your announcement in the chat window. Anyone?
Oh, Pat,
Pat's waiting.
give me just a second here. Go ahead, Pat.
I was just going to refer to it, and maybe you've talked about this. I just tuned in. There are the powers that be in Kerrville have been working extremely hard to figure out why we've been ignored in the distribution of COVID viruses. And last night there was an email saying that we will be getting this week 1,200 new doses. Now, most of these doses are going to go to the workers, the healthcare workers, and the patients in nursing homes, et cetera, the first tier 1A, who have not yet gotten them. There will be only a few, as I see it, that will be going to seniors over 65. So you might check. There are numbers. I tried to post what I got on Facebook. It was a Facebook post, but the wrong part of it posted. I don't know how to, when they put so much and so many, I don't know how to separate them. So anyway, you can call the, oh geez, I don't have the numbers in my head. I will be working the phone bank tomorrow, actually. The phone bank numbers are available through the county anyway, the county website. So, okay, we're all waiting. We're all doing our best to get these shots. Bye-bye. I mean, I'm not going by.
Anyone else?
I'm here.
All right, we'll light our chalice. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul. And now please join us in reciting our mission statement and affirmation, which will be displayed on the screen.
Be just a second.
We journey together, guided by UU values to seek, nurture, and serve our loving church family, our community, and our world. The doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another. Our first hymn today is Spirit of Life. And that was Peter Meyer performing that instead of Sam Chandler. Now, Elena will tell us, here are the ways you can still be in love with the world. Elena?
Thank you. All right, can y'all hear me? You know, it's funny watching that video. I hadn't realized that the one you picked had the church choir with it. That's so fabulous. I have to say, one of the things I miss the most about being in person with everyone is getting to sing together. I'm choir member, and we tried that up in Plano for to do one of those produced choir videos for Christmas Eve. Didn't come out as good as Peter Myers did. I'll just say that. So 2020, I think, was hard on all of us. And among the many losses of 2020, one of the ones that hit me was the death of an environmental writer named Barry Lopez on Christmas Day. He was known mostly as an environmental writer with books like Horizon and River Notes, but like all the greats, his true subject was really the complex relationship of the natural world with the people who shaped it and were shaped by it. His friend Bob Secaccia said in a tribute, to pretend you knew better when others didn't, to pretend this is not your fault, to pretend you were a holy messenger and everybody else was a fool, was his very good definition of a sin. We have painted ourselves into a corner. Everybody, very rightly insisted, held a brush. Everybody holds a brush. And that means that every one of us can choose either to paint ourselves into a corner or to paint an exit instead. So I'm thinking with a tiny bit more hope these days about the possibility that we will avoid driving the human species into extinction. We are, of course, like most college freshmen, waiting until one breath after the last moment. But it's just possible that 4 years of inaction and wrong action have brought enough people to a point where they're ready to get behind the kind of climate action that will be required to keep us from spiraling out of control. Maybe we had to pass through despair first. Maybe we had to pass through the illusion that small incremental changes would be enough to keep climate change a ripple on the edge of our awareness, something that affected people far away, but not us. And now, standing on the cliff and looking at the drop, maybe enough of us will finally be ready to change our relationship with the natural world, to reimagine the nature of the sacred and give up the illusion that we are somehow unique and separate. So Barry Lopez offers us a good place to start in that quest. Here's a tribute that Pam Houston wrote about him in Orion magazine. Look, he was always saying, listen. The last time I saw Barry was at the Berkeley Book Festival in 2019, where he told a story about sitting in a strip mall in Alice Springs, Australia, with a Pintupi man. Barry was explaining to the man the distinction our culture makes between fiction and nonfiction, the factual truth versus the emotional one. The man listened carefully, thought for a moment, and shook his head and said, that wouldn't work for us. Then he said the distinction we would make is between an authentic story and an inauthentic story. An authentic story is about all of us, all the people. An inauthentic story is only about the one who wrote it. I put this story in my pocket with another I heard Barry tell about a word an Inuktitut speaker in Yellowknife shared with him. Isumatuk, storyteller, the person who creates the atmosphere in which the wisdom reveals itself. And in that same pocket, I added something else Barry said when we were teaching together at Pacific University, that we are pattern makers, that if our patterns are beautiful and full of grace, they will have the power to bring a person for whom the world has become chaotic and disorganized up from their knees and back to life. Triangulated, these three seem sufficient to construct a writer's life. Look, he was always saying, listen. Here are the ways you can still be in love with the world. So I want to share with you some words from Lopez himself, also published in Orion magazine, and this is called The Naturalist. Hang on, I'm going to put up some pictures here in the background. There we go. Yay, it works. My home stands on a wooded bench set back about 200 feet from the north bank of the Mackenzie River in Western Oregon. Almost every day, I go down to the river with no intention but to sit and watch. I've been watching the river for 30 years, just the 300 or 400 yards of it I can see from the forested bank, a run of clear, quick water about 350 feet wide. If I've learned anything here, it's that each time I come down, something I don't know yet will reveal itself. If it's a man's intent to spend 30 years staring at a river's environs in order to arrive at an explanation of the river, he should find some other way to spend his time. To assert this, that a river can't be known more than saying a brown bear can't be completely known. The reason this is true is because the river is not a thing in the way a Saturn V rocket engine is a thing. It is an expression of biological life in dynamic relation to everything around it. The salmon within, the violet green swallow swooping its surface, alder twigs floating its current, a mountain lion sipping its bank water, the configurations of the salt that break its flow and give it timbre and tone. In all the years I have spent standing or sitting on the banks of this river, I have learned this. The more knowledge I have, the greater becomes the mystery of what holds that knowledge together, this reticulated miracle called an ecosystem. First-hand knowledge is enormously time-consuming to acquire. With its dallying and lack of endpoints, it is also out of phase with the short-term demands of modern life. It teaches humility and fallibility, and so represents an antithesis to progress. It makes a stance of awe in the witness of natural process seem appropriate, and attempts at summary knowledge naive. As a naturalist, I have taken the lead of native tutors who urged me to participate in the natural world, not hold it before me as an object of scrutiny. When I'm by the river, therefore, I am simply there. I watch it closely, repeatedly, and feel myself not apart from it. I do not feel compelled to explain it. What being a naturalist has come to mean to me, sitting my mornings and evenings by the river, hearing the clack of herons through the creak of swallows, over the screams of osprey, under the purl of fox sparrows, is this: pay attention to the mystery. We are no more separate from the river or the herons than your right hand is separate from your left, or your skin from the blood that nourishes it. The idea of a mechanistic universe, one that can be disassembled into pieces to be isolated and controlled, is a modern error at the heart of our environmental, political, and spiritual crises. None of these is separate. In fact, nothing is separate. Separateness itself is an illusion, and one we would do well to shed. The greatest lie of our modern world is that humans are separate and above the rest of life and our natural world. We sit inside walls made of shaped gypsum and wood, on foundations made of reconstituted limestone, working on computers assembled from bits of the earth dug up, melted down, shaped, and reassembled into tiny electronic miracles. It's easy to think we have dominion, as the Bible puts it, but then a hurricane or a tornado or a wildfire sweeps through, destroying it all, and reminding us just how little control and mastery we actually have. Sometimes a red-tailed hawk comes and lands on the trellis outside our dining room window, and I think about his life, buffeted by winds, frozen in winter, perched in the Texas ash trees waiting for a tasty rabbit lunch. What does the hawk feel? Does he think about the cottontail, picturing its white flash darting from cover, or does he just react faster than thought? Look, Lopez was always saying, here are the ways you can still be in love with the world. We are one with the earth, with the entire interdependent web, and Lopez felt it while he sat on the banks of the Mackenzie River, watching the salmon and the swallows swoop and dive. It takes time to feel this truth, years of watching the interplay of basalt and fast green water. Time is the one thing our earth has. Sometimes when I'm struggling against despair, against the cruelty and greed of our fellow two-legged inhabitants, I reach for one of the many rocks I collect, or I think about a rafting trip my family took down the 264 miles of the Grand Canyon a few years ago. The rocks visible at the bottom of the canyon are basement rocks, among the oldest on Earth, and estimated to be roughly 1.7 billion years old, almost half the age of the Earth. These rocks were originally laid down as sediment that became sandstone or shale or lava that flowed from an ancient volcano. They were buried under miles of rock. Geologists estimate they were 13 miles below the surface, underneath mountains at one point, and immense forces heated, melted, and deformed them into the Vishnu schist. All of these processes happened over periods of time we can hardly imagine. When those basement rocks were forming, the only life was simple single-celled organisms, blue-green algae that formed stromatolites, that produced O2 and changed the planet's atmosphere, making complex life possible. These rocks formed long before dinosaurs. They have seen all of the 6 major extinction events the Earth has lived through, including the one we're living through right now. Even the more ancient layers of limestone, shale, and sandstone exposed in the canyon are unimaginably ancient. The Kaibab Formation near the top is 270 million years old. Only the carving of the canyon itself is recent, a measly 5 to 6 million years ago. So this gives me a little perspective. It's like the exhibit at the Natural History Museum in New York. You've probably been to similar ones, where you walk through a scale model of time since the universe formed, up and around a wide spiral from the initial singularity through the formation of galaxies and our solar system to the beginnings of earthly life, where the existence of modern humans is just a thin line, no wider than a pencil stroke at the very end. This is not to say that humans can't do enormous damage. We can, but mostly to ourselves. The Earth will be fine. Another billion years of rock will be laid down on top of us. You know, to think of ourselves as separate and above, the end point of evolution, master of all we survey, is nonsense. We're no more masters of the Earth than the trilobites were in their day, 500 million years ago. We're not separate. No creature, no force or sediment or tree is truly separate. Tug on any strand of the web and you set off a vibration, likely one you'll never see. Do you know about the discovery in the last 20 years or so that trees communicate through chemical signaling in the air and through subsurface mycelium, thin strands that have been dubbed the wood wide web? If a tree is attacked by insects, it sends out an alarm that prompts other trees to synthesize more pest-repelling chemicals. And trees of different species protect and nurture each other, sharing water and nutrients through the mycelium. Arborists for too long thought trees were passive because they can't move or speak, but they act. They use their connections to nurture each other. How many times do we have to relearn this lesson? We have so many examples. A scientist believes he's discovered a miraculous pesticide that will kill all the bugs destroying crops and the fleas and mosquitoes that carry typhus and malaria. What he doesn't know is that DDT is carcinogenic in humans and is thinning the eggshells of some bird species, causing declines in the populations of majestic birds of prey like osprey and condors. It's more unexpected consequences. But they're only unexpected because the decision makers weren't immersing themselves in the full ecosystem, weren't watching the whole river and understanding that everything affects everything else. Our smallest interactions with each other create ripples we can't predict and will never see. It's true on the level of ecosystems and economies, and it may be true on the level of our very souls, or soul, singular. Physicist Fred Alan Wolf lays out a logical and mathematical proof in his book, The Spiritual Universe, that there can only be one consciousness in the universe. Now, I'm not going to claim to be able to verify the math, but it builds on quantum principles about what is necessary in order for a particle of matter to persist. Matter in our universe can only exist and persist if there is but a single consciousness, a single knower in the sense of the observer you've probably heard about in the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. This intrigues me because Wolf is essentially using math to prove the Buddhists were right when they said there is only one divine self or soul. Our perception of ourselves as separate beings is fundamentally an illusion. The deeper reality is that we are all aspects of a single consciousness, temporarily taking on the costume of separate bodies in order to learn and return to the one source. Your identity of yourself as a separate being with experiences no one else has ever had and understood in exactly the same way is true on one level. But on a deeper level, it's an illusion. We're not separate from each other. And we're not separate from the Texas ash trees or the mycelium that connects ash to oak or the buffalo grass or the cedar waxwings who flock in our possum haw trees at this time of year. Calcium carbonate forms both our bones and the Austin Chalk Formation underneath our feet. No matter what miracle of medicine we invent or waterproof boxes we buy to bury our beloved dead, 500 million years from now, we will be fossils in formations a few feet above the trilobites. Now, arguing about masks, whether plastic is a miracle or a scourge, and whether it's a good idea to change all our vehicles from internal combustion to electric is still necessary. These choices affect the quality of our lives and our children's lives. Humans have more power to shape or destroy the earth than anything that's ever lived on the planet before. But if we're going to use that power for good, we have to fundamentally reimagine our position in the universe and our connections to each other. In a very real and literal way, we are one with the earth, one with each other. No matter what feelings you may have for, say, members of Extinction Rebellion or the Proud Boys, we're bound in the same web. Our souls are one. Now, some days when I read the paper, this is a very hard thing to remember. Some days I want to cut that thread, disclaim membership in the same species as people who do horrible, destructive things. Of course, they think what I'm doing is horrible and destructive too. And if rocks have some form of consciousness the way we now understand trees do, the Austin chalk outcropping in my backyard is laughing at us all. Silly children squabbling over man-made laws and leaders when someday you'll all be dust, part of the rock some unimaginable descendant is carving up for her own shelter. So Lopez offers a different way. Immerse yourself in firsthand knowledge. Just watch. Don't try to design solutions or set yourself above the rest of the ecosystem or disclaim that you're holding a brush or even to distill wisdom. Just feel the web singing through your own body. When I am by the river, therefore, I am simply there. I watch it closely, repeatedly, and feel myself not apart from it. I do not feel compelled to explain it. Look, Barry Lopez was always saying, listen, here are the ways you can still be in love with the world. Amen.
Elena, thank you so much. We appreciate your perspective and the wonderful photographs. If there's anyone who has any comments or reaction, please wave your hand and Justin will unmute you.
Oh, June's got her hand up. Give me just a second. Let me get to you. Excuse me.
That was a wonderful sermon, and the pictures of the Grand Canyon brought back one of my top trips in my life, floating down the Grand Canyon, and we did it at the we were not in a raft. We were in the wooden boats like they originally used to navigate or to explore the river, and so we went at the pace of the river, and it was an absolutely wonderful thing. It's been 35 years ago. So maybe the canyon was a little not quite as deep then. But anyway,
Had the dam been built yet?
When the dam was built, yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh. There was worry about, what it was going to be doing to the river and where we would camp along in case they released more water than they were expecting.
So I highly recommend, I've always wanted to go on one of those stories, although I'll admit to being slightly terrified of it at the same time. Highly recommend a book called The Emerald Mile. Oh, now I can't remember the author's name. Anyway, it's called The Emerald Mile, and it's about 3 Grand Canyon boat pilots who really wanted to go set a record for making the entire length of the canyon in a boat. And so they illegally got into the river as the dam was releasing a huge amount of water to keep the dam from bursting. There had been flooding upstream and they were afraid the dam was going to burst. And these guys jumped into the river in the middle of the night to try to set the all-time speed record for navigating. And it is a beautiful book. It's got suspense and just gorgeous writing and well done. So I wish I could remember the author's name. I think it's Kevin something, actually.
Well, it was a fantastic trip. Setting a speed record, I don't know, would have done much for me. and I admit that I did it with a lot of fear, which in my lifetime, what I've done in spite of fear has been much more rewarding than things that I feel comfortable in.
I was fairly terrified to go on the 25-foot long giant motorized rafts. But it was wonderful. And for anybody who hasn't been, highly recommended. Side canyon hikes are great. And on our trip, we had a big knot of people who were there celebrating their 60th birthdays. Mm-hmm. So the node of ages in our particular group was 60, and there was a group of ladies who were celebrating somebody's 80th birthday on the trip with us.
Yeah, we had a lady that was traveling alone in her 80s on the Dory, and I remember the rafts. At one point, a couple of big rafts went by, and then they waited at the bottom to watch the dories go by, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, so fun. Thank you for finding that, Vicki.
But I did want to say that the sermon gave me some peace, knowing how truly inconsequential we are, and how whatever we do to the earth, it won't matter in the long run.
I mean, we're only hurting ourselves. Exactly. I mean, that's not true. There are other species that we're taking down with us, but when you look at it in the big perspective, and it occurred to me as I was as I was speaking, that I said no one else has had as much destructive power to change the earth as we have. It's not actually true. The stromatolites, the blue-green algae that created the atmosphere on the earth, completely transformed the atmosphere from one that was mostly carbon dioxide to one that is 19 to 20% oxygen. That was the biggest change, probably, created by life.
And then comets can do some damage too. But anyway, but
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah. But really, change happens. That's the lesson I take from geology. Mountains go up, mountains come down. Dirt piles up, forms sandstone, gets crunched into schist, gets carved through by a river. That's our lesson for the day.
a valuable lesson.
I've read some Barry Lopez. I can't remember what, but I must see what the Kerrville Library has, and maybe they've got the Emerald Mile also. But
Yeah.
Barry Lopez will all seem new, even if I reread some of the same stuff I've read before.
So I just recently finished Horizon, which was I think it was his last book. Anyway, Horizon is big, sweeping, and it's really about the horizons of our lives and covers all kinds of things, including talking about his childhood. He survived some pretty extensive sexual abuse as a child, and he writes about that. So it's Horizon, highly recommended.
Oh.
All right, and David's got his hand up. Give me just a second here.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to share something very brief that, I mean, this holistic interconnection of everything is something that's been at the core of my belief system for more than 50 years. And my aha moment was I was an undergraduate and I came across a quote from the philosopher Hegel, and it's just 3-4 words. And it was the aha moment that crystallized everything for me. And what Hegel says is, the truth is the whole, and that's WHOLE, not HOLE. The truth is the whole. And to me, I was like, right, that's right. Everything's connected. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that because it's a beautiful little axiom that's easy to remember.
Thank you.
All right, and Jill, let me get you up there.
The ultimate Grand Canyon trip, and probably most of those of you who've already mentioned Grand Canyon trips are probably familiar with it, but John Wesley Powell's account, I just wanted to try to find it on the shelf and I'm not sure where it is. He was a one-armed Civil War veteran who got a crew together and they explored the Colorado River in their wooden boats, and their flour got wet and their food got wet. And the only people who didn't, well, I won't, it'll spoil it if I tell you who survived and who didn't, but it is his writing. He was one of the original American geologists. When I worked at the U.S. Geological Survey, we put on a kind of a parody type comedy show. And it was, I forget what it was called that year, something about the weaning of the West. And John Wesley Powell was one of the major characters in this. And that history is so interesting. And he was heroic, and he's hardly known in this country. He was also very interested in Native culture, and he wrote a lot about their art and their culture. If you can get his book, or I have it if I can find it, if anyone wants to borrow it. Another one I'm reading right now, which is fascinating, by Simon Winchester, and it's called The Map That Changed the World. And it's about the first stratigrapher, the first, he was a canal builder and a surveyor in England. His name was William Smith. And he's the first one who saw the strata and actually mapped the strata. So he kind of tipped the world over, because up until then, everybody believed that the world was the age that Bishop Ussher said it was. And he's the one that showed, no, you can go down in these strata and see how old the earth really is.
anything by Simon Winchester is
Oh, yes,
fabulous.
yes.
But that's one of my favorites. And I've never read Powell's original writings. I know what other
Oh, it's
people
fabulous.
say. I'll have to go look that up.
It's absolutely fascinating. I'm going to see if I can find the book while all of you were talking.
All right, and Vicky, let me get you on there.
I just want, thank you so much for this sermon this morning. I just wanted to mention two of Mr. Lopez's early books, Arctic Dreams, about Arctic exploration and the history of that, and also Crossing Open Ground. Those were two of his works that received lots of awards, like the National Book Award and things like that. And I also wanted to share that I made dinner for Barry Lopez once. He was a speaker at the University of Nebraska when my late husband was the dean of a college of architecture, and Joe was a great environmentalist and a huge fan of Barry Lopez, and invited him to come for a weekend as a speaker. So not only did I have the pleasure of sitting and listening to him talk, one to a large public audience and then to several small classes of graduate students, but he came to dinner at our house, and he was really charming and bonded with a very aged dog that we had at the time, almost to the point where we almost let Pepper go home with Mr. Lopez. But he was charming and funny and kind, and he helped me do the dishes.
Oh,
There.
now see, that's the mark of a true gentleman.
I believe so. I believe so. Yes.
Oh, what a wonderful memory.
Yes, very much.
And I'm a
so.
little jealous, I have to say.
Well, actually, I spent over 30 years in Oregon. I moved here from there, and that Mackenzie River I'm very familiar with, and a tear came to my eye when he started describing
Yeah, that really-
the wildlife and the fish, and I mean, I've fished all those rivers, and
Well, the sad thing was the wildfires swept through that river valley this fall, and they had to evacuate. I don't remember all the details, but I know that I don't think the fire burned their house, but it burned the valley, and they had to leave. And he was ill with I think it was prostate cancer.
I
So
found the book. It's called The Exploration of the Colorado River and Its Canyons by John Wesley Powell, and it's a Penguin edition. I'm not finding a publication date on it, but it's probably still in print. I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's a good description of Powell's trip in the Emerald Mile. And anybody who's been to the Grand Canyon, I don't know if they still do it, but there used to be a little theater outside the entrance that played a movie explaining Powell's life and sort of dramatizing his journey. So I'm familiar with the broad outlines, but I've never read his own writings.
Anyone else? All right, we'll close with the hymn, The Oneness of Everything by Peter Meyer.
Soul as a song to sing of the oneness of everything.
Now we'll extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Good health and every good blessing to us all. Thank you.